happy holidays from myself, Jesse, and the Ancient Andes podcast. Please, if you are enjoying these podcasts, follow and subscribe wherever you may be listening from. And if you want to support, you can also do that via the support button on Spotify and iTunes. Any contribution is greatly appreciated, and it helps to power this podcast and keep it going. We are supported entirely by our listeners and do not use any paid advertisements in this podcast. Not yet, anyway. It is my great honor to bring you today our special guest, Cody de Witt. Cody is a Texas native who lives in Cusco, Peru, and is a good friend of mine. He is the director of the Language Institute Language Heritage, and his wonderful wife, Denitza, has the best Spanish courses available at expertspanishlessons.com. Together, they run the NGO Pura Vida Foundation, where they give young women from rural communities the opportunity to pursue their dreams of studying at university in Cusco. Cody is also the creator and founder of hikeclubperu.com and also the Hike Club community on Facebook. In addition, he smokes the best meats and cheeses south of the Rio Grande, bringing real barbecue flavor to the Andes. In today's podcast, Cody and I sit down to talk about Sacsayhuamán, the megalithic fortress above Cusco, and also the quarries that were used to extract the stones that were used for Sacsayhuamán's construction. It's a very interesting podcast, and I hope you enjoy it. After the podcast, there is a bonus segment where we talk about some petroglyphs that Cody has found on a particular stone at the site. It's a short extension, about 4 or 5 minutes, and well worth the listen. So please stay tuned after the podcast. Hope you're doing great. Happy holidays and enjoy the show. All right, I'm back with the man, the myth, the legend, Cody, my good friend. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. If I was doing any better, I'd be twins, Jesse. Good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see you too, man. And I just want to say thank you for everything, Cody. You really took me under your wing when I came to Cusco, and I wouldn't have had the experiences that I had without you. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with me, man.
Don't make me cry. Yeah, come on. We're in public. We've got to be
knowledge, but yeah,
a man's man.
You shared so much with me, man, and you brought me into your house and you gave me a place to stay and you took me on these amazing hikes and you taught me about the culture, and I'm always grateful for that. So thank you, brother.
It was meant to be. I mean, you contributed, as you know, it was a reciprocal relationship, and I think we forged a friendship that's going to last for as long as we last.
Amen. Yeah. Amen, Cody. So thank you for being here with us, man. Let's dive right into it, brother. We're going to talk today about Sacsayhuamán, the fortress above Cusco. This is by far one of the most mysterious places I've ever been. I mean, I got goosebumps the first time and the last time, Cody. It's just unbelievable.
I got them now.
Right? It's amazing.
Just thinking about it.
And you're going to have to go up there today after the podcast, brother, and check it out and just take it all in.
I will.
Again. So let's dive into it. I'll let you talk about it. Let's talk about the origins. I know the history is a little muddled, obviously, because the Inca didn't have a writing system. So
yeah, it is really muddled. I mean, you know, even the name is up for grabs. I mean, Sacsayhuamán, most tourists and visitors can't say it, so they say sexy woman, the sexy woman. But you know, it was. I get goosebumps every time I go there, not just because of the megalithic nature of it, but I think about, you know, the final battle. You're talking, they came from the coast, they worked their way to the belly button of the world, to the seat of the Inca in Coricancha. They worked their way to Cusco. I mean, the center of the Tahuantinsuyo, the 4, you know, corners of the Inca Empire that stretched for 6 countries. And then here it was. We win Cusco, then they are beat. It is the final conquering. And of course, I mean, we could go into Espiritu Pampa and the final, you know, the remains of the Inca Empire, but it really went down at Sacsayhuamán. You know, they approached from, I'm really bad with directions, but basically over there where the Rodadero is, they approached from that direction, really coming up the Sapi River. And, you know, the chroniclers said that literally some of the Spaniards were pissing their pants. I mean, they had, I think, 2 cannons, you know, a handful of horses, a handful of men, and here you have this zigzag megalithic, seemingly impenetrable wall, and between where they were and where the Incas were held out, I mean, the Quechua, of course, the Inca is the king, but where they were held out, you have this huge esplanade. So there's nothing but a big frontal assault. I mean, there's no way to do it but just to run across the esplanade, you know, in a hail of stones and arrows, and I mean, and just get it. And they did, and that it went down in Sacsayhuamán. Yeah, you can still feel that kind of energy there, you know, today.
It's just unbelievable. I can't imagine what that scene must have looked like. And when Sacsayhuamán was in its prime, because the Sacsayhuamán that we see today is nowhere near what the complex once looked like, as you know. I mean, most of those original colonist buildings, well, conquistador buildings in Cusco were built with pieces of Sacsayhuamán. They really tore it down, and the only remaining pieces of it today are what they couldn't move, which are those megalithic stones that we talk about, which some
So
are
true.
estimated to weigh 300 tons. I mean, who even knows? You know, I've heard estimates between 100 and 300, which is a pretty wide gap. But it's
Yeah.
just fascinating how they transported these in the mountainous area of the Andes when there were no rollers, no trees. I mean, all these eucalyptus trees were brought in, you know, hundreds of years later. So it's mesmerizing and it's unfathomable. So
Really is. And you know, there were some Russians that they were contracted by the Ministerio de Cultura here in Peru to do ground penetrating radar, and they you know, they there's a lot of debate about how deep they go into the ground. So I mean, what we see today is, I mean, it's huge. It's, I don't even know how many meters. I'm not really a statistics guy, you know, but we were talking like 5 meters tall. But then they also are seated deep into the ground.
so
It's
who knows the actual extent of these stones and how large they are?
That's why it's hard to
It,
calculate the weight, you know.
well, and exactly, and there's no concrete mortar. There's nothing like that. I mean, I know on the inner layer you can see kind of a mixture of larger stones mixed in with clay. That's kind of like the foundation for the backbone. But the main stones that we see on the outside, I mean, they are just going in together like it looks like Herculean Tetris almost. You know, there's no rhyme or reason to it, but it just molds perfect together.
Yeah, it really does. Um, there's a little image here I like to share. You
That'd be
know, this
great.
is the classic map of Cusco, and you know, with the rivers being the belly and the back of the puma, and the Sacsayhuamán is the head. So, um, you know, the Imperial Inca Cusco was in the shape of a puma, you know, as so we're told. You know, everything is kind of debatable, but you know, so
Right.
that's that zigzag wall is always like, you know, reported to be kind of like the hairs or the
Mm-hmm.
you know, the zigzag of the shape of the head of the puma. But it was a very important place. I mean, strategically, just how it, where it's situated, you know, overlooking the city. You know, something that is really interesting about the upper parts, Muyu
Muyumarca.
Muyumarca, yeah, the towers, yeah. Um, you know, like you said, everything's been carted off. All those stones were repurposed into houses and haciendas and temples and churches. But what's left, we can see, you know, those concentric circles. And it's still debatable what that served for, if it was astronomical towers, you know. Um, try to look for a picture, Muyumarca.
I've heard also
But
that they were possibly centers of worship for the sun, and it was a connection between Hanapacha and the upper world and a connection with the earth. That was their closest way of getting, was up in this tower. And so they would do also ceremonies. There's a number of little aqueducts and canals that stretch outside of it where water would flow, it almost looks like.
mhm.
And you know how important water was. I mean, that's almost all of these amazing ruins and sites are based around some form of water and the energetic properties that it holds. And they also talk about the possibility of these towers, because there were three of them. There's Muya Marca, and then there were also two other towers that were next to it, both also ending with Marca, but I'm not sure what the full pronunciation is. And there's a lot of talk about them generating subtle energies that were able to be magnified throughout this place. I mean, who knows? That's getting into a lot of he
Yeah.
said, she said stuff, but it's just
Yeah.
fascinating. And they look like chulpas, I think, in their original state, which were the
Right.
few quote unquote funerary towers that you see closer towards Puno, but you can also see them at Niñez Marca and Paucartambo and other places that you know of, I'm sure. So it's a big mystery.
It's a huge mystery. But those towers, I mean, having the concentric circles, and of course the three, the Andean trilogy, it just
Of
really,
course.
it smacks of in my imagination, it smacks of like, you know, entering in, like only certain privileged people probably would have had access to those inner circles, and then what in the world went on there. That's up
Well, it's
for.
fascinating that you bring up the trilogy. I didn't even think about that. And
Hmm.
there's also three walls in Sacsayhuamán. Like when you're looking at
Hmm.
the main steps up there, it's 1, 2, 3, and like you say, each one of them has stones that are 5 meters tall by 5 meters wide and weigh hundreds of tons.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so much going on there. I'm just kind of flipping through my pictures. Um, uh, the Rodadero. Let me share this. Back
Yes.
again on the other side of the Esplanade. I mean, we're kind of jumping around, but for those that are familiar with it, I mean, this is the slide. This is, but it's
Hey,
a
and you get moving on that slide. I almost sprained my ankle at the
whoo,
bottom. I was not
for
prepared for the
sure.
speed. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there used to be those. I don't know if they're still there, but those tires at the bottom, kind of like bumpers.
I love that. Yeah, my mom and dad both probably could have used those too. We all went down and yeah, we almost got injured for sure.
Yeah. Well, that is the way I understand it. I have a geologist friend, and those are it's a natural formation. It's a like glacial scrape, you know.
Okay,
So
okay.
so you imagine the glaciers moving, and they're carrying all these huge stones with it, and it's just like sandpaper. It's just you know, and this like protrusion has just come up. And the
It's
whole thing, like
super
the
smooth
limes, yeah, super smooth. I mean, imagine the force, the pressure necessary to make that. It's
for sure.
it's impressive. I About that, in general, the Nazca plate and the Andean plate collided and made the Andes. So the zigzag walls are primarily made of limestone. So that's there's places where you can see fossils of seashells and in the walls. I know of two places where I've located them, but that was the ocean floor. Can you imagine? I mean, so not only has a lot going on historically and anthropologically and sociologically, but geologically. I mean, that limestone exists because it was once the ocean floor and just got pushed up in a massive upheaval. It's it's ridiculous, really, to think about.
it's it's unbelievable. And when you go past the Rodero and you go into there's like a big court plaza almost.
Hmm.
Um, some people call it the cocha. Some people say that it was a reservoir where they might have
Hmm.
kept fish and things like that. I don't know. But what's your theories on like the construction of Saxon? Do you think this is an Inca site, Cody, or do you think this was here before the Incas? And I'm
Well,
speaking of the whole site. I'm talking about the megalithic walls. I'm talking about, I know it's a crazy
yeah,
question, but what's your gut
no.
tell you when you look at it?
Well, you know, um, I kind of always default, and maybe it's like a cowardly approach, but about Occam's razor. Occam's razor is like a philosophical principle that the simplest explanation is usually the best. So I don't ever venture into